In this episode of the Orange Nerd Show, we are talking about Jonathan Majors, that whole debacle, how that's going to impact the MCU. We're talking Disney layoffs. The metaverse is dead at Disney. We're talking all kinds of stuff on this episode of the Orange Nerd Show. Welcome aboard to another episode of Orange Nerd. I got my brother, my collaborator, Dr. Dre, ready to operate in the house. Welcome back, Dre.
Hey, and I'm happy to be back. This is we've touched on these stories before. Obviously, things have developed now for a little bit, so that that'll be good to kind of update the viewers on some of what's been going on in the Mouse House. It's been very interesting as of the last I'd say, I mean, it's really the last couple of months, but very particularly in this short window of time, last week or so. So we'll definitely be breaking that stuff down. These layoffs, what does that mean for the company? Very interesting, where they're deciding to kind of trim the fat, so to speak, or they consider us fat by any reasonable metric. Anyway, it's going to be an interesting discussion. I'm so happy to be here. If you guys want to follow me at home, you can go do so right down there at VashSky, just right down there. Just go ahead and type that in. It should pop up for, as Kristen Wastelands McCarthy herself would say, for all the
robust
discussion right there. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now in Orange Grove 55, where we have some amazing shows, including the one you're watching, Orange Nerd, hosted by my brother in arms over to my left over here. Exactly, right? Absolutely fantastic. We have a great show, Citrus Corner, where we cover everything Walt Disney World. My show, Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove. And Jay with Story Geeks, who covers everything, all the stories that impact our lives. And right now, what's impacting our lives? Well, it's not just these stories you're about to hear, but it's also the stories that we see. What is that? The Mandalorian, of course. And we're covering every single episode as they come out. I believe this episode is going to be on Saturday. A little change in a venue there, but it should be a lot of fun. Please check that out as we cover episode 5 on that show. And without further ado, OG, please take it away.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let's cover this Jonathan Majors story. This is some pretty heavy stuff, but we're going to really kind of break down like what this means or what it potentially means for the MCU. Marvel has been going through it lately. But so why Jonathan Majors' assault arrest is so disturbing and so complicated. The Marvel star faces domestic assault charges and now other allegations spanning years. Dre, what are your overall thoughts on this situation and the possible impact it might have on the MCU?
Well, it's this is a very kind of interesting one, right? So it deals with a very kind of heavy subject matter. Obviously, domestic violence is nothing nothing to nothing to joke about. It's a very kind of impactful issue to many people, whether they've experienced it firsthand or not. It's something to kind of take seriously. And when these allegations were first alleged, and we heard that he might be indicted for these things, it was kind of a whoa. What is going on here? Didn't know that this was ever going to be an issue. I hadn't heard of much of Jonathan Majors' past that would involve these kind of allegations, but now we're hearing that there's a number of previous incidences, not just one, but you have people that have worked alongside him, I guess, in the film industry saying, oh yeah, he's this, he's that, he's the other thing. And it's like, so you're getting this kind of piling on. Initially, I believe Major's attorneys kind of came out and said, hey, you know what, this is all going to be this all misunderstanding right here. We have video evidence suggesting that this didn't actually happen in this, the way it's being alleged, in the media and so forth. We have, I believe, sworn testimony from the woman in question saying that these allegations are untrue and so forth, and all these kind of things were happening. But now this, I believe that is a New York District Attorney, OG, that's kind of pursuing this and saying, yeah, we're bringing criminal charges. This is going forward. This is in stark contrast to another high-profile case that we've actually seen coming out of the industry recently. This people remember this Rick and Morty incident where I guess there were allegations of some kind of misconduct before in his history with the industry. And remember, he lost his gig working with Adult Swim and Cartoon Network and so forth with this Rick and Morty franchise because of these allegations. It turns out the OC DA, the Orange County DA, those charges were dropped because they just had insufficient evidence to actually charge him. So in stark contrast to this with Jonathan Majors right here, they are actually pursuing these charges. So clearly, I understand it's different locales entirely. There are different, let's say, regional issues that you need to consider. But apparently, the district attorney in this case actually feels that there's a case going forward that's worth pursuing. So it's very disturbing. But what we wanted to talk about here for the folks at home is these are very complex issues and ones that we would encourage you to do your research and kind of see from your side what's actually going on. And hey, if we can maybe not judge people so harshly until an actual verdict is actually read, that would be nice to see. But from our standpoint, looking at it from the perspective of OrangeNerd here on OrangeGO55, it's the bigger implications for the entire MCU, because this isn't just happening just in isolation. You also had this Victoria Alonso thing actually taking place alongside this, and it's really kind of created this shadow lingering over what was an illustrious and pristine MCU before this point. So this has really big implications here, because if I'm not mistaken, OG, maybe you can correct me, Jonathan Majors was going to be the Thanos of this phase. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. He was in this for the long haul, and he still might be. Look, this is the thing too, is like, number one, we don't know. Like, if he's guilty, absolutely, he deserves justice should be had here if he is absolutely guilty of what they're alleging. But we don't know that yet, to be fair. He hasn't been convicted yet. But we're kind of in a weird area right now with this kind of stuff, because we've seen over there at Warner Brothers with David Zaslav. I mean, Ezra Miller has a laundry list of this stuff, and some pretty bad stuff. And Zazzy said, no, we're going forward. We're doing The Flash. The movie is too good. It's just too good to cancel it. We're keeping this guy.
That's the allegation.
right. And so now it's like, okay, so what does Disney do? You have this guy who's accused of a horrible, heinous, disgusting act. Do they follow the Zazzy route and just business as usual, or do they recast? Now, in my opinion, if I was Disney and this guy is guilty of doing what they're saying he's guilty of, you absolutely recast. You do not do the Zazzy thing and just move forward with it. What you do is you recast it. You get someone else in there. I don't think it's look, you have a company like Disney, it's a family brand. Marvel is a family studio pretty much, right? You cannot have a guy like this who was convicted of something terrible like that representing the MCU. You just cannot do that. They have to cut ties. Now, I'm saying this with the assumption that if he's convicted, if he's not convicted, then sure, he has every right to continue being a part of this Marvel franchise. But it's tough.
Do you make a decision now? Because we're only one film into Phase 5 at this point, right? And Quantumania was the first one. Right. So do you make a move now, assuming that there might be a conviction, or do you wait until a point where it's really kind of too late to pull back? So that's the big gamble. That's the big risk there. And for Zazzy, I mean, he felt that, hey, the movie was so good, We're gonna put it out no matter what's in Ezra Miller's jacket. And, I mean, look, they had him. They had them go to rehab, right? And apparently they've been out of the news, out of the headlines. They've been far more well adjusted, let's say, to with the assistance of treatment and so forth. So that's been a better story than it had been even months prior. With this situation here, though, these are assault allegations that have really affected some other people in potentially damaging, very very damaging ways, and that's what's being alleged here. It's the Walt Disney Company, is not going to feel comfortable with having somebody with these kind of allegations out there being so integral to their overall plans for the MCU going forward. I can see there's going to be some conflict here. I'm not saying that the Ezra Miller issues are any less heinous or egregious or whatever. I'm just saying it's really it's all situational, right? It's all circumstantial. It's all it has that whole thing to it, and to what degree is Ezra Miller going to play in the in the DCEU going forward versus Jonathan Majors and his role for the MCU going forward, and do you really want to have him be the kind of face of this franchise ongoing? It's right. Man, there's some really interesting implications here, OG. I'm not sure what to do at this point, but it's a public relations nightmare no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, they're really in a rock and a hard place with this situation, because you have a guy here with Jonathan Majors that he's really the only good thing about Ant-Man Quantumania. All the reviews about that movie have been pretty bad, but Jonathan Majors is the one kind of like gem of the whole film. So what do you do? Do you just go ahead and cut ties with this guy without knowing for sure if he's even going to get convicted? And then what happens if he doesn't get convicted? Now you just cut ties with this great actor, and now you lost a great actor to play this role. Or do you wait it out? But the problem with waiting it out could be years for this stuff to pan out. So what do? You wait it out, and then you have 2 or 3 movies come out with him in it, and then he gets convicted? I mean,
oh man, this is really not good. In the Rick and Morty situation, I think they may have responded a little bit too early, because they canceled that guy like right off the bat, before anything was coming in, and that was really unfortunate, because that has been a very successful franchise for the various studios involved, various release platforms and so forth, and now you've broken off ties with one of its creators and one of its it's an essential piece of that cast, simply because of allegations, right? So it's like, do we take that approach, or do we actually wait and kind of see how these things play out here? Maybe Jonathan Majors' legal team is correct. Maybe this all is a bunch of hot air, and now you have people dumping on him because of one thing or another. I'm not sure. It's possible. I mean, Jonathan Majors just had a successful movie with Creed 3, right? And that was very well received. It did pretty well at the box office considering its budget. He was the best thing about Ant-Man Quantumania. Do you necessarily want to cut ties around him now? I can see why the studio might be, let's see how this plays out here. But like you said, you get too far in, now there's nowhere you can go, or not a lot of easy solutions anyway.
Yeah, no, exactly. This is a tough situation. I'm telling you, Marvel, it's like that old saying, when it rains, it pours, right? And right now they're going through it with this Jonathan Majors thing. Our next story is going to be Victoria Alonso. We got a little bit of an update with her as well. But you have that drama, and then you also have all this stuff about just in general, Marvel has been kind of underperforming with their shows and their movies. They've been kind of in a creative slump, and it's been a rough patch for sure for the studio that's known for crushing it all those years. All of a sudden now, the wheels are kind of falling off the MCU train. It's kind of sad to watch, to be honest.
It is, and the MCU has had a fantastic run that has been largely scandal-free, if I want to say. Look, you have 30 plus films come out. Things are going to happen. There's no question about that. But from the point at which Iron Man came out back in, I think, 2008 now, if I'm not mistaken, right? To the point where Endgame came out in 2019, the core cast and everybody involved in it made it all the way through, without controversy, without premature deaths or whatever, or anything actually happening to them. And, they were able to, all of them individually, respectively, whatever, able to craft, a litany of films over that longest timeline right there. And it really has been a remarkable feat. Just that act alone is just like, whoa. And then you add on the actual success that they've had with the Marvel MCU being the biggest franchise ever that the world has ever seen, and all the accolades that go along with that. But now, well, here you go. Variety just has this article here. Marvel's big mess. Victoria Alonso's contentious exit presents a rare public drama for the studio. From the box office disappointment of Quantumania to assault allegations against star Jonathan Majors, Marvel Studios is facing one crisis after another. This is by Adam Biveri and Angelique Jackson over here at Variety. It starts out with the accolades of Marvel, but then it says this. It took just a week for that impeccable reputation to all but collapse when Disney, Marvel's parent company, fired Feige's most high-profile lieutenant, Victoria Alonso, after 17 years with the company, most recently as the president of physical, post-production, visual effects, and animation.
Now, real quick, I just want to address something real quick before we move on.
Please.
This has been kind of a narrative going on. I see this a lot on Twitter, and I see it even in the trades, right? Like, she's been with the company for 17 years, and it's kind of like this tone of like Disney really fucked up because she's been with the company for 17 years. I have to say, look, that's fantastic, right? She's been with the company a really long time, but just being with the company for a very long time doesn't necessarily mean that you're still a good fit. I mean, look, Michael Eisner was with the company for a very long time, but towards the end, the wheels started to fall off and it was time for change, Bob Chapek has been with the company for double the amount of time that Victoria Alonso was with Marvel. I mean, I don't see a lot of fans coming to his rescue saying he shouldn't have got fired. He was with the company for 30 years. Where's Variety with all that nonsense, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't really care if she's been with the company for 17 years. If she hasn't been, if she's been kind of crap in the bed ever since she got promoted, you don't just keep her because she's been with the company a long time,
Yeah. So it's all these trades and publications, they have people they like and they have people they don't. They liked Victoria Alonso, just like they liked Peter Rice, right? Before he was frog marched out of the company, and they gave the similar accolades and praise to him. Oh, he's been in the industry for this long time and he has so much experience, and how could they do this and all this kind of stuff, right? And it's like, well, if you're undermining the CEO as he's attempting to conduct business, well, things are going to happen to you, right? Just like you said, OG, hey, you could be a hit maker, but as soon as you're not a hit maker and you have all these problems associated with you, well, you might actually be, marched at the door here. Honestly, this has been an issue that has been brewing within Marvel for years now at this point, this kind of drop off in quality when it comes to their VFX animation. Not to mention their kind of storytelling and so forth. It's just been an issue, and yet she's been at the top here for all this time. And some people actually cite her as the reason why these things have actually transpired. It's no surprise that they would actually get rid of her, but it's the pretext in which this is all surrounding, which is very odd. COG, when we originally covered the story, I thought like you, hey, this was around her performance, and I do believe that is why this actually happened, but that's not what they're saying. They're saying it's around this Argentina 1985 thing where she was, I guess she was not only helped develop it, helped produce it, helped promote it and so forth, that went against clauses in her contract that forbade that kind of activity, given that she was such a high-profile figure within the MCU, and she had all these responsibilities, right? She was heading animation, she was heading all the VFX work, she was heading physical production, post-production, I'm sure content development and so forth. So it's like, she had a lot of roles. Why are you doing this thing to her on the side? Like, you're already, at this point, stretched too thin, and yet you're dedicating precious resources that we are paying you for
Right.
towards this other endeavor right here.
Well, this is
very interesting.
It is interesting. This is I think what's going on here with Argentina 1985 is I think Disney has been looking probably for a little while now to get rid of her.
Exactly.
And I think this situation, this what Disney is calling a breach of contract, has sort of given Disney legal cover to do so.
Right.
So that's what's going on. I'm with you, Vash. I don't think that this is the sole reason why Disney is firing her. I don't buy that for a second. I just think this is the most ironclad legal reason why they're firing her. You know, it's kind of like your job, right? Like if you piss off your boss, let's say you tell your boss F you in the Taco Bell parking lot, and then you go to work on Monday, right? Okay, well, maybe your boss can't fire you for doing that at Taco Bell because you technically weren't at work, but now your boss has it in for you, right? Now your boss wants you out of there. So they're going to start writing you up for every little mistake, right? And then eventually they can fire you based on too many write-ups, okay? That's what's going on here with Miss Alonso. They wanted to get rid of her, and basically here's the write-up, Argentina 1985.
Correct. I think that's exactly what's actually transpiring here, OG, for sure. I mean, it's the pretext, but it's, this is not the reason, right? This is not the it wasn't just about this. It was many. This is just I think the out clause per se that they're using to actually get rid of Victoria Alonso before her contract is actually up. Yeah. I wanted to read you this one paragraph here. Sure. Things became untenable, these sources say, after Alonso continued to promote, quote, Argentina 1985 during awards season, despite signing an amended employment agreement expressly forbidding her from doing so. Alonso's attorney, Patty Glazier, calls this contention, quote, absolutely ridiculous, and counters that the executive was terminated, quote, when she refused to do something she believed was reprehensible, though what that was remains unclear. And there have been allegations that, she was, an openly LGBTQ plus member of of that specific community right here, that she's a woman in the industry, and, the big bad company is coming down to crush her or whatever, and all that kind of whatever. And it's just like, okay, well, if you're taking that road, clearly you have a limited understanding of kind of the bedrock foundation of what is actually transpiring here. It's interesting. Patty Glazier, if that name sounds familiar, well, it should, because, well, we have this article here from Variety. Lucasfilm sued for egregious firing a producer on Star Wars series The Acolyte. That was published, March 8th, 2023. And this was obviously the Karen McCarthy lawsuit. We talked about that a little bit on a previous show here on OrangeNerd 55. But Glazier, where do we see that name previously in this article? Well, we see it right here. McCarthy's counsel at Glazier Well, which includes Patricia Glazier. That's her. The same counsel that is representing Karen McCarthy in what she's saying is an egregious thing that transpired between her and Lucasfilm. Well, now this Victoria Alonso has retained those same legal services, alleging that this is absolutely ridiculous, end quote. So why is that happening? I don't think this is a coincidence. I think, and Glazier has gone after, from what I understand, some big high-profile figures beforehand, before this incident. I mean, this seems like, somebody... Yes, somebody heard about what happened with Victoria Alonso and looking to pick a bone with Disney specifically, looking to maybe get as much money as possible. And it's like, okay, we'll represent you. Now, why is Victoria Alonso aggrieved in the way that she is publicly? Well, as we speculated, maybe she didn't get that golden parachute that she was expecting for 17 years of work, right?
That's it. Oh, that's exactly it. And we're hearing, there is reports right now that Victoria Alonso and her attorney are right now in negotiations with Disney for a settlement. So that settlement will likely happen. I usually these settlements do. Disney's going to write her a check to keep her quiet or whatever. And the whole thing will be over with. And then suddenly she'll be Disney's best friend again.
Exactly. And so why is she why is Victoria Alonso going public with this? Why is she retain the services of Glazer? Why is Disney saying that she violated the terms of her agreement? It's all over the same thing. It's money, right?
Yeah.
She didn't get the payout that she wanted. And Disney cited that as a specific reason in order not to pay her what she felt like she was owed. So that's what's coming across right here. It's unfortunate that this has actually had to go public and didn't go towards a type of mediation that didn't, have this exposed in the public sunlight, let's say, because I'm sure Disney doesn't like this going around. But it is interesting. We're seeing a lot of changes, a lot of moves, and look, we can cite these as individual events and so forth, but I think these things are happening. Maybe not Jonathan Majors so much, but I think some of these things are happening for a reason. I think it's all surrounding a company that is kind of forced to be changing with the times.
Yeah. Oh no, it is, and you're going to have this sort of upheaval every time change happens. It comes in the form of like this upheaval, right? It's like an analogy would be like when I was when I changed my studio, right? And I got the shelving unit, and you got me these great lights and all that stuff. Well, the process of changing from the old set to the new set was messy, right? It was like a day and a half of a total mess in here, right? Because change was afoot, right? You have to kind of like make a mess to kind of build something different, and I think that's kind of what's happening here, in that there's a lot of change at Disney, a lot of upheaval, but it's because, like you said, it's change. And that's what happens. We saw the same thing with Michael Eisner towards the end. The last few years of Michael Eisner, it got really messy, got really dirty. And then ultimately we emerged out of that. I think a stronger Disney, absolutely a better Disney. And we're kind of going through that same cyclical process right now. It's a time of change. It's getting messy. It's muddy. But I do, and look, I am, for the most part, an optimist. I do believe we will emerge. I do believe Disney will emerge as a better company overall, but we'll see. Look, that's not set in stone though. Like, look, these people that think, like, I remember during the pandemic, people were like, yeah, just shut the park down for 3 years if you have to, because, Disney can afford it. And I was saying back then, no company is too big to fail. No company is too big to fall. And that includes Disney. So this stuff is still scary, even though in my heart of hearts, I do believe Disney will emerge fine. It's still, I'd be lying if I said I was not worried. I mean, this is a scary time. If you're a Disney fan, a very scary time, because nothing is a guarantee. Nothing's
a guarantee. And even back at that time, I mean, we had some conversations where it was like, this is going to cost a lot of money. And I don't think people quite realize that just the veracity or extent to it. I mean, it was so huge. It was something that the company had never really experienced before. Even World War II, they were still able to make film products. And now they couldn't even do that, or at least reasonably anyway, in 2020. It was a very tumultuous time, and we're still dealing with the consequences from that. Some of those things are kind of like they're coming to bear now, which is really unfortunate. And so everything has a cost, everything has a price. That's just a fact of life. And now here you go. Disney CEO Bob Iger confirms start of layoffs with 3 rounds of cuts expected before summer. This comes via Deadline by Dade Hayes here. And I mean, the report that Deadline actually released, and I think we touched upon this as well in a previous episode, but that was, Deadline just saying, hey, we're hearing this. Well, now Bob Iger has officially confirmed it, that it will be in kind of three rounds. As the article describes right here, Disney CEO Bob Iger has confirmed the first of 3 rounds of layoffs is starting this week as the company looks to reduce its workforce by about 7,000 employees. The executive's memo to employees, read it below, tracks closely with what Deadline exclusively reported last week. 3 rounds of cutbacks, with the second slated to be the deepest. This week's initial round comes a few days before the company's annual shareholder meeting on April 3rd. You can expect OG55 will cover that extensively. Okay,
yeah.
That's going to be, there's going to be fireworks there, I'm sure. Iger first announced plans for the downsizing in February, describing it as a key to achieving $5.5 billion in cost savings. Managers have been finalizing details of the new structure during subsequent weeks. The question here, we knew these cuts were coming. Didn't quite know how it was actually going to transpire. Now we know it's going to be in 3 rounds. And now we know not only, kind of when or rough timelines, but now we know specifically where. And I think that is also a very interesting story, OG. This comes to us via Deadline. Once again, Disney General Entertainment layoffs include Mark Levinston, Jane Bieber, and Elizabeth Newman as TV production gets consolidated, IP acquisitions dissolved. What this basically states here is you're going to have TV executives be shifted around, some of them removed entirely. I believe the biggest cuts, though, are going to come from, Freeform?
Yeah. And Hulu.
Freeform, Hulu, and it looks even maybe effects as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
This is quite a bit here. This is a lot.
Well, and it's interesting too because there's been a lot of talk in the town, right, about a possible Hulu sale. Is Disney going to sell their remaining stake to a Comcast, right? Because Comcast right now owns the other portion of Hulu. Is Disney going to sell their portion to Comcast and let Comcast own it and license out their IP, or is Disney going to hold on to Hulu and write Comcast a big check? That's remained to be seen, but it's very, very interesting though that these cuts are coming to Hulu. So I mean, it seems like, hey, look, if you're looking to offload something, that might be something you would do, is start to make cuts in this, division. Right. So that's kind of interesting, and maybe they're thinking the same thing with Freeform. And look, Freeform, I don't know. Maybe I'm not that demo, so I don't care. And maybe I'm just being a selfish, asshole. But if Freeform goes away, I'd be fine with it. I mean, I'm surprised it's even still around, to be honest with you. I don't know. But are they going to maybe sell Freeform? I mean, maybe. I think that it's definitely expendable. I don't think the Walt Disney Company needs that platform. I mean,
You've heard Bob Iger recently, as soon as that town hall, actually, with employees on studio grounds, right? He talked. Bob Iger talked about how we have a plethora of assets available to us, right? And it's like, well, that's interesting. I mean, and that was in response to the possibility of selling ESPN. So it's like, that's an interesting way of looking at the company, as assets that could be maybe leveraged, that could be sold, that could be, whatever happens to those. Now Bob Iger, being that person, has suggested that there's still value in legacy, right? And how they obviously there will be a transition to digital platforms, and DTC platforms specifically, as we go forward here, but that there's still value in some of these legacy assets that they have, and that includes television. And there have been conversations, OG. I mean, I'm talking going back as far as like 2000, I want to say 10, 11, 12, somewhere around there, where Disney was talking about maybe selling some of their legacy assets regarding TV. Even that far back, and Iger was making the case, hey, we're in a transforming industry at all times, not just right now, but just over time. Again, when he was working at ABC, that was the start of the introduction of cable television. And so, old established network television was like, how do we compete with that? How do we deal with this kind of incoming technology, as it were? So Bob Iger knows you want to be ahead of the curve, not behind it. And that's why it was like, hey, do we hang on to these television assets now while they're still valuable, while we can get something for them, or do we keep investing in them as it goes on here, knowing that at one point these might be irrelevant at a certain point, right? And so that's a kind of interesting conversation that they've had back and forth. I think now it's like, okay, well, if we're gonna move some things off, we might want to start now, while there's still some value left.
Right.
But Hulu, That's an interesting one. So, and this covers the whole gamut of whether it be DTC or whatever. If you have an asset, right, that you're maybe looking to sell, it would make sense that you divest resources away from that in preparation that it is sold, right? If you're selling your old Buick LeSabre, you might want to take out the stereo that you had installed and keep that for the next car, right? That's, I think, maybe what's happening here with Hulu. There's been some speculation and there's been some rumblings. They might be looking to get rid of this. Well, now you have one more thing that you can add to it to suggest that Hulu might be sold within the next, what is it, 2 years? Is it 1 year? Did they have to make a decision in 2024? Is that right?
2024, yeah. So we're looking at like about a year or so. I don't know what month in 2024 is the deadline, but give or take a year, pretty much. And they got to make a decision, and I think we're going to hear soon. I really do. I think by the end of summer, maybe we'll probably know.
And for those unfamiliar, by 2024, Disney has a decision to make when it comes to Hulu. Because remember, that whole thing started with a 33% stake divided against 3 studios. And it was a way for the studios to kind of come together and say, let's pool our resources together and let's have one platform that we all kind of equally own, equally operate, equally run, and have, instead of all of us launching our own streaming services, let's just pour all of our resources into just one, right? And so that's where you had Comcast Universal have 33% stake, Disney have another 33% stake, and then Fox have a 33% stake. When Disney purchased Fox, now you have 66% stake in Hulu. And now, Universal's odd man out, right? They now have a minority stake in Hulu itself, and that, they have limited control, limited power when it comes to that kind of arrangement. So the agreement was in 2024, this all would be rectified one way or another, let's say, right? That it was either going to be Comcast owning all of Hulu or Disney owning all of Hulu, which they would have to pay Comcast for their share of Hulu. So I think the valuation is now, what, $9-10 billion or so that a Disney company would have to shell out if they wanted to own Hulu exclusively. Whereas the flip side might be from Comcast. And as we have speculated on this show multiple times, hey, if you wanted to reduce that cash payment towards Disney, Comcast, then why don't you go ahead and give us some of the things that you've been holding on to, specifically in a park like, I don't know, Islands of Adventure over there in Florida, Marvel, give us those rights back kind of thing. So I think Bob Iger might be looking at some opportunities here.
Well, and that would be a pretty penny, from what I understand. Comcast, if they were to do that, it would be roughly $20 billion. That's a chunk of change.
Yep.
And when you're strapped for cash, that's looking pretty good.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So it's like, well, okay, how much do we need Marvel? Maybe, could we do 15? Include some of those Marvel rights and some other things that we're holding on to, like the Hulk rights for theatrical, for example. It's like, can we do this in a way that is contingent with the amount of money that we're talking about? So it's just a fascinating kind of move here. But what's also interesting is this is just one area of the company that's been kind of it's looking like it will be reformed, let's say, from these layoffs. Another one, though, as the Wall Street Journal actually points out here, Disney eliminates its metaverse division as part of the company's layoff plan. The unit, once seen as developing a new form of storytelling, had about 50 employees. So when we talk about metaverse, we had talked about a couple of times on this show before, but Bob Chapek, when he ran the company, he had a big plan for the metaverse, at least in his head. It didn't necessarily provide much detail on what that was actually going to be. Was it going to be a metaverse like what Meta is doing over there at the old previously named Facebook company with Mark Zuckerberg and everything? Or was it going to be a synergistic flywheel? Was it going to be a way of leveraging product? Unsure, but this was the group responsible to kind of figuring that out and laying the groundwork for a new form of storytelling, I guess. It says right here, Mickey Mouse has left the metaverse. Walt Disney Company has eliminated its next generation storytelling and consumer experiences unit, the small division that was developing metaverse strategies, according to people familiar with the situation, as part of a broader restructuring that is expected to reduce headcount by around 7,000 across the company over the next 2 months. They say 7,000, 7,000, 7,000. It might be more. And it might be longer extended. Headed by... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say real quick. Here's the thing. Look, we've been fair with Chapek a lot on this channel.
Sure.
Probably more than just about the majority of the fandom really demonize that guy like crazy. And I don't think Chapek was the bad guy that everyone thought he was. I think that he had ideas, and we're seeing that. I mean, Bob Iger is implementing a lot of his ideas even to this day, right?
I agree.
Here's one of those ideas where I'm like, Chapes, maybe not, because the metaverse is kind of DOA. It's kind of dead on arrival. The metaverse is not doing Facebook, or now it's called Meta, but it's not doing that company any favors. Facebook recently announced they're laying off 10,000 employees. Okay, this metaverse thing is a money pit. And the last thing Disney needs right now is another money pit. They already have the streaming thing, which they went all in on, and that's losing money like crazy. But that's, I think, fixable if done right. The metaverse thing is such a new thing. It's a fad. It's already kind of fizzling out. The last thing Disney needs to do is go ahead and pour millions or billions or whatever it costs to do this stuff into that. Right. It's right now. I think it's a smart move to ixnay on that. Now, look, I will say, I do want Disney to take some risks, though. Eventually when they stabilize, I do want Disney to look into next gen storytelling and what have you. But maybe we wait until we kind of get to the other side of this economic, instability. Because look, even Walt Disney. I mean, look, when times were tough at the studio during the war, the movies coming out of that studio were not like Snow White and Pinocchio. When you look at the movie of the wartime era, they were these package films. And I'm not putting these movies down by any means. They were still fantastic. But that you could tell they were of a more budgeted, conscious studio. You didn't have the elaborate backgrounds like in Pinocchio with three caballeros and things like that. These were totally different products.
They were.
And you could see it. So sometimes even what Walt Disney understood, you have to sort of adjust when the money isn't quite right. Right now, no metaverse. We can do the next gen storytelling thing, some other cool idea when we stabilize. But let's get the studio, the animation, Marvel, Star Wars, our theme parks, all of that, our core businesses in order first. And then when that's stabilized, we can go forward with trying some new things. But right now is not the time to throw money into like unknowns, in my opinion.
And remember, OG55, and I think this line here actually kind of details this in this article. I'll read it in a moment, but it's the metaverse was all about leveraging the company's intellectual property. Well, if your intellectual property is not necessarily resonating with audiences on its own, then how do you leverage it at all, right? So Eddie Soto had a good quote earlier on Twitter. He said, "Before we head into the frontier, let's restore what we have," right? And I think that's most appropriate. Headed by Mike White, a former Disney consumer products executive, the division was tasked with finding ways to tell interactive stories in new technological formats using Disney's extensive library of intellectual property, the people said. So, I mean, that was the kind of the key thing there. And I do agree with you, OG. It's like, look, listen, there will be time to maybe invest in a metaverse type product or some new frontier, this new next gen storytelling initiative, right? When it becomes a little bit more tangible, right? I mean, we're like on the bleeding edge here. And are we necessarily going to invest company resources on a bleeding edge thing that, as Mark Zuckerberg himself has said at Meta, might not be profitable for like 10 years? And and Meta they've changed their name. They've invested billions upon billions into that venture. And even Mark Zuckerberg's like, don't expect a return on investment anytime soon.
Yeah.
For Disney right now, you just can't do it.
You can't do that. You can't do that. And it's like, look, I don't remember the name of the company that Bob Iger got involved with, but when he was retired, he joined the board of one of these kind of like these metaverse companies. I don't know if you at home remember he had like Bob Iger had like a computer little avatar where he's in like that leather jacket with the pop collar.
I do
So
remember that.
Bob Iger joined the board of one of these metaverse companies. This was like last year, I think. So it wasn't like Bob Iger was adverse necessarily to the metaverse, but that was like last year. And honestly, things have changed since last year with this metaverse. It was really looking like last year that this thing was going to be the new thing, and not anymore, right?
Did Bob Iger step down from that board? Do you know, OG?
I don't know if because sometimes when these guys get involved with other companies due to conflicts of interest, they have to do that. Like I know when Disney when they launched Disney Plus, Bob Iger had to resign from the Apple board. He was on the Apple board for many years.
He was many years.
And he had stepped down from that. So I haven't heard anything, but it's possible that he had to step down from that because there might have been a conflict of some sort.
Or maybe this was a resolution to that conflict of interest.
Oh, maybe.
I never thought about that until you talked about it. I was like, well, wait a minute. And maybe this was that. I'll do some more investigation on that, but that's a very interesting front right there. Regardless, I think the thought processing reasoning still applies, right? It's like we can't invest company assets towards something that might not be profitable anytime soon. We have to we got to trim a little bit. We got to move on. I understand you want to be ahead of the curve rather than behind it, but this was really ahead of the curve. It was into a venture that might not be profitable at all. So you kind of have to, there's a time for exploring new frontiers, and there's a time to kind of step back and say, we really got to figure this out on the footing that we have right now. And I think that's where they're going. But there is one portion of this that was a little bit sad to hear. It says right here, Mr. White, which we talked about right up there in the previous paragraph that we read. Mr. White was also involved in an effort last year to design a membership initiative that in some ways resembled Amazon.com Prime program, which would integrate customer data across multiple Disney platforms, including streaming services, Disney Plus, online retail operations, and smartphone apps that visitors to Disney's theme parks use to buy food, merchandise, and other products. That effort has also been abandoned, according to people familiar with the matter. That one, I'm a little disappointed in. I thought there was real potential there for a kind of Disney Prime type setup where you kind of have like an ongoing membership program, and that kind of unlocked certain deals, certain products, and so forth that you can kind of use and kind of, like D23 is kind of an oddball out. You can incorporate aspects of D23 into it, or D23 entirely into it, right? You could incorporate an annual passport membership maybe into it. You could, Disney Plus obviously, but maybe Hulu or ESPN Plus or whatever else they want to integrate. You can kind of combine that, and it kind of like a one-stop shop for all things Disney. For Disney fans, by Disney fans, maybe would be the branding of it, but you could have done something there. I think there was real potential here, and for them to abandon this as well, I don't know. That one's a lot more tangible. That one's a lot more fleshed out. Amazon has, really been benefiting from that for quite some time. Why couldn't it necessarily retain that part of it? That's very odd.
No, it is. And I've been saying for a long time now, I think that things like you mentioned D23, I think it'd be very cool to have an option on your Magic Key to for an extra, whatever it would be a month, you can add your D23 membership to your Magic Key, right? And it's all part of this one kind of Disney membership every month. And, it kind of plays to what we're seeing here, where it's like you can kind of pick and choose. It's kind of like this buffet where you choose the Disney things that you want to subscribe to and what have you. And you have basically like maybe one card or one app that you have access to all of that stuff. I think that's a great idea. And I think that's kind of the direction they were going at with this thing. And I think I agree with you. I think out of all the stuff, I think this had the most potential. And maybe they'll revisit this. I think it's much more likely this is something they might revisit in a few years when they stabilize. The metaverse thing, I don't think they're ever going back to that. But this is a possibility.
I thought it was. And I was a little disappointed to hear about that kind of aspect of this next gen unit got cut, because I think there was real potential there.
Yeah.
Especially as I think Disney fans have embraced the company as almost like an identity for themselves, right?
Right.
And the association with Disney has never been closer. And, obviously we represent our love of the Walt Disney Company behind us right now, right? And we have a whole channel dedicated to it.
Right.
But I think that it's become almost a lifestyle brand. Why not incorporate? Why not incorporate that into your long-term strategy for the company, but by offering a product like this, it could have been really, really interesting. But yeah, c'est la vie. That's going to be that. Also wanted to touch on this story right here. I'll go ahead and share you this link here.
Yeah.
Via laughingplace.com. Longtime Disney publicist and D23 spokesperson Jeffrey R. Epstein. I want to make this clear. Jeffrey R. Epstein, not another
No.
Jeff that has, bearing that name. Just want to make this clear, guys. Among the first layoffs at the Walt Disney Company. And he has been there for quite a while here. The vice president in charge of corporate communications in 23, spearhead and host, Jeffrey R. Epstein, is among the first in a lengthy series of job cuts that began this week at the Walt Disney Company, according to the Wrap. This is quite interesting here. It kind of has a kind of a summarization of all the things that are happening when it comes to some of these layoffs and so forth, and what's been happening in the news lately. But this was a surprising one here. OG, I did not expect this.
No, I didn't either. I mean, I didn't expect it, but these are the kind of jobs, unfortunately, that when a company is going through it, that they're going to cut, right? Unfortunately, Jeff is like one of the nicest dudes. I've talked to this guy on Twitter. He's very, very like receptive to like fans. He'll talk to you. He'll conversate with you on Twitter, what have you, on social media. I met him actually at the D23 fan event, the 10-year anniversary of D23 at the Walt Disney Studios in Burbank. I think that was like in 2018, I believe. Again, nicest guy when I met him in person. And he just like, he really does represent Disney in like the best way. And I'm sad to see him go. Hopefully when Disney kind of gets back on their feet a little bit, maybe he can re-enter the company in some other position, some other form. I think that would be pretty awesome. It's really sad. Here, look, this is the thing. It's really sad when I understand why Disney is doing what they're doing with these layoffs. You either lay off people now or you have everyone get laid off because the company goes under, right? So
yeah, exactly.
It's a necessary evil, so to speak. But it just hurts when you see great cast members like Jeff get cut from the squad, because this guy, you talk about the Disney difference, you talk about that Disney kind of, that customer service, that front facing kind of persona. This guy, he embodied that. He's such a great guy, and to lose him, really upsetting. It's sad. It really is.
It is sad. It's we don't want to see anybody lose their jobs,
No.
and yet, going over, we just went over 50 being lost from a whole division, and TV and Hulu and all these kind of things. There are people behind the numbers, right? That we're hearing. It's not just 7,000. It's 7,000 people. It's 7,000 people who have contributed much of who they are, what they are, towards the benefit of the company. Now you're seeing these people cut. There is a price for obviously what happened during the events of 2020, but not only that, just being kind of out of touch maybe with the country, the world, the storytelling in general. It hasn't been solid, and now we're seeing the effects of that. And it is heartbreaking to see. It's going to affect great cast members like this one, but it's tough. It just really is tough. There's also, I don't know, should we don't necessarily do this OG, but should we tell tales out of school a little bit here regarding? Okay, all right. There's been with Jeffrey in particular. There's been some talk and chatter amongst the online community that maybe he was too close to some other journalists out there, some other media influencers and so forth. I don't think this has anything to do with that, but it was interesting how that conversation was going around, let's say, even before all of this. And we're seeing people that could potentially have a potentially problematic implications or so being removed or whatever. I do find the correlation fascinating.
I'm not as privy to this, this news, but
Okay.
he was friendly with like vloggers or like,
media influencers, let's say.
Okay.
Some people said too friendly. I don't know if there's anything to do with that, but it was just interesting how that was bubbling up, not even that long ago, a few months ago, and now this, it's just, I find it fascinating that people who, working at the company, no matter how long they've been working or even where they're positioned within the company and its portfolio, how if there's even a tinge of, things that could become a PR situation, let's say, for the company going forward, that they've been removed. I just find the correlation fascinating. I don't know if this was a result of that. I kind of doubt it, to be honest, but it is, I don't know. I suppose it's worth mentioning if we're going to be comprehensive about our coverage.
Yeah, I don't know who he was cozy with. I'm not privy to that at all, but he was a great guy. But I could see like if we're talking like vloggers and things like that. I mean, I've always said, like people say like, well, oh, the park vloggers, they promote the parks, and that's true. They do, but they're also the most vocally negative too. And Disney takes all that into account, right?
Sure.
So the normie isn't going to sit there and go, well, look at that light bulb and look at that piece of chip paint and focus on the stuff and make it like, put it out there to thousands of people. But the vlogger will. Disney doesn't like that. Disney doesn't like that. They don't want a bunch of negative stuff on YouTube about their company because they're a business. They're trying to sell a product to you, and then you have people on there maybe undermining that, right? But at the same time, you do have people out there that are really, and I'm not saying shills or anything like that, but when you have vloggers out there in the park and they like something, then it's a benefit and a boon to the mouse. It's a benefit and a boon to Disney. So it's a double-edged kind of sword here with this, I think. It's not all,
Oh, sure. And we know the people that the company invites out and the people that they don't. Now everybody in the sphere covers the parks, but some people cover it a little bit more positively. Others don't. And the people who do, well, they are the ones that get invited out. Oh, what a shock there, right? And the ones who don't aren't. There is that whole thing that happens there. And so there is, let's say, OG preferential treatment on that end. Disney knows if you're positive, they know if you're negative. And if you're positive, and well, you're going to be up higher in that media stack, let's say. And when they have a big profile event, they know who to call. So it is fascinating how all this whole thing works. But no, there was some, let's say, some potentially journalistic ethical compromises that could have resulted from the let's say the relationship that was established there, and maybe Disney wants to rid itself of that as well. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But from what I understand, he was a great cast member, and beyond all that, it's just it really is unfortunate that so many people are getting laid off, company wide. I mean, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. I know Wall Street there was a boom there with the stock for a while, and
come back down to earth.
Yeah, well, it's come back down to earth. But it was unfortunate that it even boomed at all, right? Over people, being cut. But this is a tumultuous time, and
and to be fair, it's not just Disney. I mean,
Sure.
the entire. I mean, you're seeing cuts from things like we've mentioned Amazon today. They're laying off thousands of people. Facebook's laying off thousands. Every studio is laying off thousands of people.
Absolutely.
I mean, or at least hundreds at the very least. But all these places are cutting back. The economy is really, look, people say we're not in a recession. We are, but that whole thing. Economy's not doing that great. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. And so it's a perfect storm of just bad shit. So
That's it, yeah.
it sucks. It sucks, but I think like I said before, I mean, I do believe we'll get out of this. Okay. And there is a silver lining. I do think and I think you've mentioned it during the show many times, but I think we do need to see Disney sort of trim the fat. And I'm not talking about with necessarily people, but just with what they own and things like that. I think Disney needs to trim the fat a little bit, get a little leaner, as a company. And there's a lot of bloat right now in Disney. They need to trim down a little bit with, like we said, maybe sell off Hulu, maybe sell off like Freeform or something, and try to, kind of sharpen your focus a little bit now.
To be fair, Iger has wanted to do that for years. For years. Like I said, that 2011, 2012 time period, I remember quotes coming out of Bob Iger suggesting we want a more nimble company, right? We want a company that's a little bit, that can react to market forces a little bit easier than they necessarily can right now. And there's been some streamlining towards the end for a while. And, well, I think this is just one more thing to add to that. And, I agree with you, OG. I mean, they've got their four fingers in so many pots, right? So many things, and the company's just stretched thin across all those lines. So that's why you've gotten, like, let's say their cruise line, for example, right? If you see the other cruise lines and how they operate, I mean, Disney's behind the curve a little bit, and that's just because, hey, we're not just a cruise line company. We are a theme park company. We are a studio. We are a this. We are a that. And it's like, that's kind of why that happens, because it's, you're just doing so much all at the same time.
Right.
The company can do anything, but they can't do everything. And that's the crucial distinction here.
Well, yeah, no, 100%. And it's a balancing act, because you want to trim the fat. You want to get rid of some of this bloat, but at the same time, you don't want to trim too much, because then you become a smaller company. And then you're a target for acquisitions. So they have to remain big enough where it's hard for another company to come and try to swallow them up. But at the same time, kind of cut off, kind of shed the stuff that you don't need. And we saw this happen before at the end of the Michael Eisner era with, Eisner got into a ton of crap he shouldn't have got into. I mean, there was so much stuff there with like the sports teams, the Mighty Ducks, and the Anaheim Angels that he bought and all that stuff. And then Disney ultimately ended up offloading that stuff, and rightfully so. Disney, I get where Eisner was going with that. Hey, we're an entertainment company. Sports are entertainment. We own ESPN. I get that. But to get into like owning sports teams, I think was really taking your eye off the ball. But we're kind of at the same spot again here with Disney, right? They acquired a lot of stuff over the years again, and now it's time to clean that up. And I don't know, it's time. And I think if anything, that's the silver lining to this whole thing, is that we're going to get a much more focused, Walt Disney Company.
We've got a breaking news story here. I just sent this, like, literally as you were talking here, OG.
Okay.
Victoria Alonso clashed with Marvel over blurring gay pride references in Ant-Man 3 for Kuwait. So
this must be the reprehensible thing that she was accusing Disney of.
Maybe. In January, as Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania was being ready for release, word came down that Marvel executives wanted an editor to blur a storefront window that featured rainbow decorations and the word pride for the version of the film to be released in Kuwait, which has restrictive anti-LGBTQ laws. The storefront was shown in two brief scenes in which Scott Lang, Paul Rudd walked down a San Francisco street. Alonso, who is gay, was an outspoken proponent of inclusion during her time at Marvel. She publicly challenged then CEO Bob Chapek to push back against Florida's, 1557 bill, as did colleagues at sister company Pixar, and she championed diverse stories. So That's
This
an
is
interesting kind of thing there.
This is very interesting. Here's the thing, and I might get some shit for this, but I've been saying this for a very, very long time. Disney is not, at its core, Disney is not a woke company. Disney is woke when they think that that will make them money in certain areas. But you're seeing it right here. They drop the woke thing immediately when it comes to another market. They are not. Yeah. They are not They are not necessarily driven by ideology. They're only driven by this stuff when they think there's a market for it, right? So that's what I think. A lot of people kind of lose. I think a lot of people don't understand that, because when you're here in America, when Disney's trying to sell their product here, they're pushing the woke progressive stuff because they think it sells here. But if you're in another country, that's not the same Disney you're getting.
True, but there are people who, as this article details, who push back against that philosophy, that it's like, well, we have a different necessarily tune when it comes to another country. Here it says right here, the Quantumania request reached Alonso, who refused to have her team make the edit as part of her duties overseeing visual effects and post-production at Marvel, insiders say. Marvel then went on to an outside vendor to see the edit through. There were several other changes to the film for Kuwait, which is the only country in which the pride references were blurred, according to sources. You do have people who push back against that, OG, right. And look,
but ultimately it didn't happen the way she wanted it, though.
Right. And well, that's maybe not that time, but maybe other times. We have seen various films, even recently, having to be altered or not shown at all in various countries who have maybe a different disposition towards some of these social issues, let's say, right? And that unfortunately has hurt the Walt Disney Company as well. And so I think you have, we've talked about it before, OG, but I think you have kind of a moderation kind of thing going on here. Just for, if nothing else, survival. Just for, hey, we have to, we are a 4-quadrant film company. We have to have this go wide as it can possibly go. We can't have necessarily a film not make it to a country just because of a single reference in some window somewhere, right? We gotta get these things out here. These were produced and have been distributed for wide distribution. So that's a real kind of fascinating thing. And well, that might have been one of the reasons why it's like, okay, Victoria, she's on the way out.
Yeah, and Disney's kind of always been that way. It wasn't really until Chapek took over when people started to kind of criticize Disney more because Iger was gone.
Sure, but that was after the expectations set by Disney themselves.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Remember when it wasn't until the Florida bill that that Chapek said, go ahead and put the Lightyear scene back in there. Right. Go ahead and put it in there. Go. He was pressured to do so, but it was Bob Iger, though. Because remember, these films were in development for years. Yeah. It was Bob Iger who took it out. And then Chapek put it back in because he was feeling so much heat from this Florida bill.
Correct.
So they've kind of always centered this stuff in with the international markets in mind. It was that brief 2 or 3 year period, though, where they were sort of putting it all back in because of appearances,
Well, I think you had people who were at various positions in the company who were, I don't want to say gatekeepers, but people who were like, this isn't going to play well to a wide audience. Maybe we should rethink this, right? I think John Lasseter was one of those people who was like, I don't think this is going to work here if we're going to be in wide distribution. And, well, he was removed, right? Now I think you're seeing the pendulum swing back a little bit, where it's like we have to moderate, we have no choice, and these people who are getting in the way of that moderation, they gotta go.
Yeah,
that's a really kind of interesting thing there, OJ. That's a really kind of that's something right there. That is not to be taken lightly. It's just, I just find it interesting how all of the people who necessarily have been a thorn in the side, let's say, to Disney, or could potentially be, are being axed. It's surprising.
Well, look what it says here in this article. It was further up, but they mentioned Victoria Alonso Oh, there it is. Okay, it says here, it says she publicly challenged then CEO Bob Chapek to push back against the Florida bill, as did colleagues at her sister company Pixar, and she championed diverse stories. Okay, now first of all, there's nothing wrong with championing diverse stories. Obviously, I'm not against that. I mean, come on, who is against that? No. But here's the thing: she pushed Chapek to get involved with this Florida bill. Now we've seen the ramifications of getting involved with the Florida bill.
But right? Who put some of those people there? Who empowered some of those people? You got to go back to Daddy Iger and say, wait a minute, I mean, he's the guy saying, hey, sometimes a company needs to take a stance. Sometimes that's going to be reflected in their product because that's the responsible thing to do. And that. I mean, he's saying stuff like that. So what do people that they've hired think when he says stuff like that? What do they do when he says stuff like that? They do what's outlined here, and unfortunately it has been that the company has seen the ramifications of these kind of decisions. And I think the 7,000 cuts, I think that is, it's made because they have felt those consequences, at least to the bottom line.
Yeah. Part of the equation is that with the bottom line for sure. And it'll be interesting to see. I think that we are going into a new age now of moderation. I think that Iger I think he had definite political aspirations, right? He definitely wanted to throw his hat in the ring for president. I think that desire is gone now. But I think when he was interested in doing that, I think he went further left than he probably normally would. Because like I said, but many times, I remember in 2016, I was a big Bernie Sanders supporter, and I remember the fights that Iger and Sanders would get into. I mean, even now, I think they're still kind of beefing right now. But Iger was not seen as a far lefty back then. He was seen as more of a Hillary Clintonite, that kind of that corporate Dem,
more establishment Democrat.
Yeah. Then when he wanted to run for president and he saw this whole like super left progressive thing was like the new trend, he suddenly went in that direction. And I think in doing so, he kind of threw Disney under the bus, unfortunately. Hopefully now he kind of goes back to his center, his roots, which I do believe he is more of a center kind of guy politically at heart, leans left, obviously, but I don't think he's as far left as he was pretending to be when he was trying to run for president. Now, hopefully that kind of shines through and we get a much more moderated Disney. And also, like you said, Dre, they cannot continue to do this where they're cutting off, a huge swath of the population that refuses to see this stuff in protest. Look, we've seen now, you just saw John Wick 4. You said it was phenomenal. And it was kind of an old school Hollywood movie, right?
Yeah.
Kind of leaned into that masculine kind of thing, right? Kind of like a Top Gun Maverick, right? Even an Avatar. I mean, Avatar was very kind of like, classic Hollywood. It wasn't really that preachy or anything. It was done in a really cool way. They got to start doing stuff like that, because that stuff is more four quadrant than these like kind of like this activist driven stuff. Right. And I'm not like advocating for one political side or the other. All I'm advocating for is to just tell stories that are more universally accepted, because that's what's going to bring butts in seats at the theater. And at the end of the day, Disney's a business, and that's what you have to do. Look, if I'm Bob Iger, I can't make films like for just me, like my personal kind of niches and what have you.
Right.
I have to understand as a head of the Walt Disney Company, the product that I'm releasing has to appeal to the masses.
Yeah.
If it's going to be successful, they got to start doing that and stop alienating huge segments of the population.
Marvel is not A24. It's like these are plus $200 million films. And when you have mass market product, I mean, you have to get the masses to actually come in here. And so when you let's just remove the way Jay handled this when we were talking to him about this. It's like remove the politics. When you have group 1, group 2, group 3, when you vie for group 1 to the point where you actually ostracize group 3.
Right.
Okay, that's not good compared to putting out a product that appeals to all three groups, right? And so that's kind of where that's where the economics lies in this. It's like just can't afford it. You can't afford to go after just one single demographic here.
No.
We have to really approach this stuff in a way that appeals to as many people as possible. Look, listen, I've heard this refrain before. I'll repeat it now. What is it? Crest sells toothpaste to inmates on death row, right? It's like, that's who they sell. I'm not saying that
What you gonna do?
exactly, right? I'm not saying they go outwardly attempting to market towards those groups specifically, but they do sell to them, right? And so it's like, okay, well, we can make a bunch of stances, or we can just sell toothpaste. And now there will always be a left-leaning bias in Hollywood and with Hollywood product. That's just how it's gonna be, folks. But does it have to necessarily ostracize entire factions of the country, or even the world for that matter? Can we produce product that maybe has even a message implied in it, but something that everybody can kind of rally around? Like you said, with Avatar, there is a conservationist message there for sure, right? But hey, it made over $2 billion. It did it successfully in a way that could still appeal to the masses. And when you hear James Cameron talk about it, he always has the audience in his head when actually constructing this. Not just the audience in Hollywood, but the audience, where, let's say, his blue collar upbringing, where, it's just, in the wilds of Canada, let's say, for his products. It's like, could a trucker, when I was a trucker, would they want to see this film? Yeah, I think so. And let's do stuff that appeals to as many people as possible, and doesn't necessarily leave anybody behind. So that, I think, is going to be a continuing story as we go along with this transformation of the Walt Disney Company under a second Bob Iger term.
Yeah, no, 100%. And real quick before we close it out, even like Walt era movies, like Pinocchio, right? The When You Wish Upon a Star, doesn't matter who you are. There's a message there, and it's actually a very inclusive message, really.
It is.
1940s, right? Very inclusive message, even for back then. I mean, they were doing that, but it's like it's broad enough though, where you're not excluding anybody. He's not making any kind of message. He's not putting a message out there where it's like, this is made for you, not you, right? It's everybody, it's a very inclusive message. And I think if Disney goes that route, where it's like, it's one big tent and you're all welcome in this tent. I'm not, hey, look, we're not going the G4 route. We're not going G4. We're not going, if you don't like it, don't watch it.
Disney, exactly right.
Right. We don't want that. Disney's a family company. They want everybody in their tent and everyone watching their content and every butt they can get in those seats. And right now they need that more than ever.
But if you're a content creator who actually works with the Walt Disney Company, if you're a creative in this space and you do have that mentality, you might not be there for long. As we are finding out here with some of these creatives who are on the chopping block, even a illustrious Victoria Alonso. So I think times are changing, and people either get on the train or they don't, because it's leaving the station regardless.
It's leaving the station. Look, it was funny, real quick. I used to work at my old job years ago. Okay. And I'm going to date myself in a second here. But to just tell you how much times have changed, right? In the last 15, 20 years. In my cubicle, I had a John Kerry for president bumper sticker in my cubicle. Okay. Nowadays, dude, you could do that. No problem.
Sure.
Hey, you work for all these studios. You could have a bumper sticker like that. No problem. My boss came up to me and said, you got to take it down. You can't have it. It's political. You can't make a statement like that in your cubicle. I'm like, okay, fine. Right. I took it down. But that was 2004, right? And then look how far we've come now with these statements. Not only is it like in your cubicle, it's on screen. Okay.
It is.
And the reason, right? And the reason why my boss wouldn't allow it isn't because my boss was like, oh, I don't like John Kerry. For all I know, my boss loved John Kerry. I have no idea. But it was because that bumper sticker can cause problems because there's other people that might not like it. Same idea with on screen. Okay. On a bigger scale though, right? Now you're putting it on screen. Yeah. It's not necessarily that's a problem. It's that you're going to have people that are turned off to that stuff. And now you're losing money.
Yeah, that's basically it. That's as simple as you can break it down there. I mean, it's just, and you can apply the same thing with the other side as well. We don't want a company who is specializing in children's entertainment for one, family entertainment for another, but four-quadrant entertainment overall to just be so politically leaning that they leave people behind. Can't have it. Can't do it. And so I think they have realize that to a certain extent. They are making changes. The question is when will we actually see the manifestation of those changes, in what form, let's say, whether it be on screen or in the headlines as we were just going over, and to what extent. So that'll be an interesting story to watch, and we'll be here to cover all of it here at Orange Grove 55.
Yes, we will. And we got that annual shareholder meeting coming up. That's going to be fire. Can't wait. Can't wait. But Dre, as always, brother, it is an honor to have you join me on these fantastic conversations. If you could let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media.
Well, the best place to find me is going to be at on Twitter, actually, at VashSky. It's right down here. Just go ahead, pop that into the search, and it should pop up for, as Christine Wastelands McCarthy would say, for all the
robust
discussion right there. Still haven't heard from her. That's a very interesting little thing there.
Oh, it's been quiet on the McCarthy front. I tell you,
really quiet. That's a very interesting kind of story right there. That's something. I just haven't heard from her at all, other than the quarterly earnings report last February. Anyway. You can find me there. And you can also find me on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55, where we have some amazing shows like the one you're watching right now, OrangeNerd, hosted by my brother to the left right here. We have an amazing show in the form of Citrus Corner, where we talk about all things Walt Disney World, hosted by our dear friend and brother, George, or Disney Family Man 23, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yep. And we have an amazing show in the form of Story Geeks with Jay, right? Who covers all of the stories that impact our lives, including the one right now, The Mandalorian, as it is released episode by episode. We'll be covering episode 5 on Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yep. And then, you have my show as well, Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
Orchard fresh and delicious.
There we go. There we go. Thank you all so much for watching. Comment down below with all your opinions on these very non-controversial topics, like is Disney.
we just dive right into it, don't we, OG?
Why not? Comment down below with all your opinions on Victoria Alonso, the MCU, Jonathan Majors, this whole idea of how Disney their approach for Ant-Man in Kuwait and all this crazy stuff, the metaverse, all this good stuff. Comment down below. Thank you all so much for supporting OG55. We all here at OG55 appreciate your support. Thank you all so much for watching. And as always, have a wonderful day.